Oh, hello there, yes. Turned out all climate conspiracy again, didn't it? Yes. It's going to be another scorcher at the weekend. I'll have to, I don't know, chop away at the garden, I suppose. Yeah. Anyway, today I just thought we'd pick up on a particular very odd tweet by Toby Young in response to James O'Brien. I'll read the James O'Brien bit first. Tufton Street is a collective description of secretly funded hard-right lobby groups masquerading as think tanks. Qualification for inclusion is not the address but the free market fetishism and dark money. Anyone professing not to understand this is probably on the payroll, to which Toby has put, in case you think conspiracy theories are the exclusive preserve of the right, and then the usual kind of kooky emoji, because he's a hip happening kid, isn't he? But the thing I have about this is that I don't think anyone who has any vague passing knowledge about the right-winger sphere that is the media in this country would have any problems with what James O'Brien has said. This is a secret in plain sight. So we end up with this kind of weird Kafkaesque, sort of almost like Stalinist show trial sorts of things coming out of Toby Young, because presumably he expects us to believe that that isn't the case, that there isn't simply this large group of people who dominate the right-wing press in the UK across the board, and who basically dictate what goes on. And, you know, they are backed up in their views, their kind of Liz Truss was right views about everything, by a bunch of extremely dodgy right-wing think tanks, a lot of whom are based at Tufton Street, and a lot of whom get some very, very dodgy funding from the US of A. Is he really expecting us to believe that? And if so, why is he lying? Why bother? And the answer is, well, because he has to play a game. And again, that's where you get this kind of weird kind of Stalin show trials, whereby the person who's on trial knows that they're not guilty but plays along because it's the party line and will be good for the party, whilst at the same time saying things that will sound good for the trial but also talking on to a higher level because Stalin himself knows that they're not guilty, without realising that Stalin yeah, you get the idea. It's four-dimensional chess stuff, but it's a really odd thing to put out. So, you know, I thought I'd just look at a couple of examples which would appear to prove Toby Young. Just recent stuff. I mean, today, no, it was yesterday, actually, we've had this interview. I'm not going to play it, but you can have a look at it for yourself, with on GB News, on Britain's crumbling schools. So you've got Tory Boy Pierce there, who writes for the Daily Mail. Yeah, that's his Twitter handle, Tory Boy Pierce, who writes for the Daily Mail on GB News, who's inviting Esther McVey, who's a Tory MP, who works for GB News, to give reasons why the government isn't responsible in any way, shape or form for crumbling infrastructure, which apparently is absolutely fine and just one of those things that happens to be. Presumably, if they'd, interviewed someone from the IEA instead, it would have been slightly more fair. I don't know, but it's strange, that kind of the fact that all of these people are in the same place being asked the same thing, or not really being asked the same thing, because if you actually watch it, there is no discussion. There's never a debate going on. There's simply people are invited to say what they're expected to say, like Esther McVey. I don't know. I cannot understand why this is not against Ofcom rules, but apparently it just isn't. Or yesterday's Telegraph had this particular piece from Ella Whelan, who is, just one of those right-wing voices. Very often turns up in Tufton Street to be interviewed by people like Peter Whittle. Apparently it's just one of those things. Works for Spiked, who have some interesting funding issues, and as ever with Spiked, they never seem to come out with something which is particularly anti-conservative party, unless it's one, stressing one particular wing, the Liz Truss wing of the Conservative Party. Yeah, as I've often said here, Brendan O'Neill never ever prints anything that you couldn't guess what he was going to say before you read it. But this is really an astounding piece. This is in the Daily Telegraph, okay, and this gives you an idea about the way that these people have completely stitched up the media, and at the same time aren't happy about it. Right? Graham Linehan isn't alone in deserving an apology. Light is finally being let in on the trans debate, which has been characterised by censorship for too long. Yeah, you know all those billions of articles you've seen in the last year about trans people in the Mail, on the Expression, on GB News, and everywhere else? Well, apparently, right, okay, it's not allowing people to have a debate about the important issues, okay? So, I just want to jump through to the end here. Yes, small victories have been achieved in recent months with light shone on the Tavistock's bad practice and on teachers pushing pronouns in classrooms, but the change we need is much more fundamental. We must be able to interrogate the notion of gender identity itself, not just voice our concern at the medicalisation of kids. Rather than merely apologise to people like Linehan for the way he's been hounded for his views, we need to debate what he says openly. Come back to that. Do we believe in self-ID, or is defending the biological differences between men and women more important than protecting some people's feelings? Most of us understand when the public sentiment is likely to be on the issue of sex and gender. The question is, who is going to be brave enough to say it? I don't know, Ella. You and every other media pundit out there. Because there isn't a debate, is there? There isn't a debate. A debate is between two opposing sides, you know. Does God exist? Yes, says the priest. No, says the atheist. That's a debate. But you don't get any debate, do you? And as for being sympathetic for Graham Linehan, his views are trans people are perverts and rapists. Okay? I don't really know quite how you have a debate with someone like that, because I don't know, maybe in Toby's world that's a perfectly legitimate thing to do. Toby has his own issues around trans people, but it's just an odd view of the world whereby we have this wall-to-wall anti-trans rhetoric, which often spills into policy making, and we're expected to believe that somehow the trans cult lobby that they are is only now that people are asking a few questions about it. It's just, I don't know, it's beyond laughable. And again, it is so obviously, it lacks that level of self-awareness, quite deliberately. It has to pretend that we live in a world whereby, I don't know, George Soros sits down with Gary Lineker and dictates what goes on across the board in British media. It's unlikely, isn't it? And the way that this stuff spills, into the real world, of course, is that you end up with government ministers who come from right-wing think tanks that will push a particular policy agenda around things like net zero, for example. People that exist in the actual revolving door. Yeah, you can post as many emojis as you like, Toby Young, but it appears to be there. And are we expected, honestly, to believe that this isn't a thing? That effectively we don't have a capture of the state by some incredible individuals of a particular ideological persuasion? Yeah, I'm probably just wrong, aren't I? Yes, I'm sure you're right, Toby. I'm sure you're right, and what you say is exactly true. Mr. O'Brien is wrong, and we have nothing to fear from all of those lovely people at Tufton Street who never talk to each other. I would imagine Peter Whittle just shuns everyone in the corridor just to make sure that he remains ideologically pure, which is why, of course, his views are always at odds with all the other people on the right. And that's another thing. They're always insisting that there's this broad church of views. There isn't. Anyway, do have a lovely and stay cool weekend. Yes, I think my cat has found somewhere cool, but he only, well, I don't know, I wouldn't want to have a fur coat, would you? Not this weather, no. Anyway, have a nice one.